Resourceful Designer, Episode 18, Tax Deductions for Home-Based Graphic Designers.
Welcome to the Resourceful Designer Podcast, offering solutions to streamline your graphic and web design business so you can get back to designing. And now, your host, he still has the diskettes for Mac OS 7, Mark DeCote.
Welcome to another episode of Resourceful Designer. I appreciate your being here, whether this is your very first episode that you're listening to, or if you've been a long-time listener. I want to thank you for tuning in to this week's episode. Now, before I get into the rest of the episode, I want to give a big thank you to Man of Steel 77, who left me a 5-star review on iTunes. And this is what he wrote. I've been filtering through many podcasts to find one like this. It deals with where I am, starting my own design business, and is a great resource. Well, thank you very much for that. I really appreciate the kind words. It helps me know that people are listening and are appreciating the content I'm putting out. Now, I would love to get your review on iTunes. Whether you just leave a star rating or if you leave a message there, it would be greatly appreciated. And you can do that easily by visiting resourcefuldesigner.com/iTunes, which will redirect you to the proper page where you just click on the Leave a Review tab. And the more reviews I receive, the better the chances of this podcast being discovered by other graphic designers when they're searching for this sort of thing. So thank you once again to Man of Steel 77 and to everybody else who's left me a review on iTunes. Now, as always, I'll start off with a resource of the week. And this week's resource, I chose HostGator. Now, HostGator is the website hosting I use for myself and my clients whenever it comes to a WordPress website. I started using them a few years ago, and I've been extremely happy with their service and with their ease of use and how easy it is to set up, install, and run and update a website through. Resourcefuldesigner.com is hosted on HostGator, and I highly recommend that if you're looking for a hosting solution or if you're looking to move your hosting provider, visit resourcefuldesigner.com/hosting to sign up for one of the hosting package, and make sure to use the discount code Resourceful25 to save 25% off your very first purchase. Now, it's the beginning of the new year, and with that comes tax season. That fun time of the year where you're digging through drawers and looking through emails to make sure you pull out every receipt that you received from the past year, hoping you don't lose any along the way. Now, hopefully you've had a better system than that, but from past experiences, I can tell you I haven't always been the most diligent when it comes to keeping all my paperwork in order. So in this week's episode, in honor of tax season, I thought I'd share various tax deductions that home-based graphic designers can claim. Now, I've put together a very easy checklist, so you don't have to have pen and paper at hand when you're listening to this episode and marking down all the things you can claim. I do have an easy PDF that you can download by either clicking the link in the show notes or by going to resourcefuldesigner.com/tax-claims and get the handy checklist that you can follow along as you're gathering all your receipts and paperwork to hand to your accountant. Now, speaking of accountant, I just want to state up front, I am not an accountant. I am not a tax professional. The following list I'm about to give you is just my 10 years in business, what I've learned over that time, plus a few other things I've learned with research for this particular episode. But before you try to claim anything or pass something off, please make sure you do ask a professional. And best of all, get a professional to fill out your taxes. Some people try to save a buck and do it themselves, but trust me, you'll get a much better return if you do have a professional fill them out. So you're a home-based graphic designer. You've got your studio, you're all set up. You've got your little quiet place with your computer, your sketch pad, whatever equipment you need, and that's where you do your work. Now, the fact that you're working from home gives you a lot of freedom, but it also gives you a lot of benefits, especially when it comes to tax season. Now, I'll state right up front that if you are working from home, hopefully you have an actual room, some sort of office that you can claim as your own, which would make it so much easier for your taxes. I know there are a lot of designers that maybe you can't do this because of just where you're living, and maybe you do your work at the dining room table or the kitchen table. Well, if that's the case, then it's a little bit harder to claim a lot of these things because, the tax man might work in different parts of the world. I'm in Canada. I know the rules are different here than they might be in the US or that they might be in Britain or Australia or Japan or wherever. But I think one thing that's pretty common is if you do want to claim a home office, it is best for you to actually have a home office. If you're working at the dining room table, it's pretty hard to say, well, this is my workspace when come 5 o'clock, the rest of the family is there eating dinner at the table. After supper, the kids are doing homework there and so forth. Then it no longer becomes your office space, and it's pretty hard to claim some of the things around that. So if at all possible, dedicate a corner of a bedroom, a spare room, even a corner of the basement that you can kind of block off and say, this is my office area. Then if there's any questions about your claims afterward, you can say, no, I've got a dedicated space that is just mine. So with that thought in mind, if you do have your own dedicated office space, then there are all sorts of stuff that you can claim on your taxes. For one, you can claim the percentage of that space compared to the rest of your home for a ton of different home-based expenses. As an example, if the room that you have as an office in your home takes up, say, 15% of the entire square footage of your house, then you get to claim stuff like 15% of your mortgage payments are now a business expense, 15% of your electric bill, 15% of your gas if you're heat by natural gas, or water bill, or whatever utilities that are involved with the home, 15% of those have now become tax deductions. Now, I know in the USA, they've got some other thing where you can calculate your square footage and there's a certain dollar, I think it's like $5 per square foot, and that's what you can claim for your office. There's also the percentage way, but different places do it differently. But almost across the board, the way it works is if you have a percentage of your home that you can claim is your office, that percentage you can claim against all sorts of expenses. Now, if you do have an office that's surrounded by 4 walls, it makes things so much easier because then you can say that everything within those walls has to do with your business and can be considered a tax deduction, including stuff like if you repaint your office, the paint, the brushes, the rollers, if you hire somebody to do that, all that could be a tax deduction because it is an office expense, as well as your desk, your chair, your filing cabinets. If you put a carpet down, your window dressing, all that stuff is deductible. Even the decorations you put on the walls or the stuff you fill your office with. As I'm looking around here, I'm talking to you, I'm looking around at my desk and I've got a kind of a hutch at the top of my desk. And on my hutch, I have a Doctor Who TARDIS, I have a Batman figurine, I have a Darth Vader figurine, I have an official puck from the Toronto Maple Leafs hockey team, and all sorts of other paraphernalia and stuff that says who I am. But they're all stuff that I bought to put in my office, and all of them are considered decorations and are tax deductible. I have a huge sword collection, and although I just recently moved them out of my office, at one point I had close to 20 swords hanging in my office, and every time I'd buy a new sword and I'd hang it, it was a tax deduction. It's my collections, that's what I do, I collect swords. But because they were decorating the walls in my office, my accountant told me that, yes, I can claim them as tax deductions because they're part of my office. Even the plant that sits in the corner that my wife put there, because it's definitely not mine, can still be considered a tax deduction. Although I don't personally deduct it, I have no idea what the thing costs. I don't know where it came from. It just showed up one day. But if it's something you bought yourself, you could claim it. Now, the other benefit of identifying your space within your home, as I mentioned earlier, is you get that percentage. And I'll just use the figure of 15% just to make things easier. That also counts for all sorts of cleaning supplies and everything to do with the rest of your home. If you happen to hire a cleaning service, somebody to come in that cleans your home on a regular basis, well, 15% of that is tax deductible because they have to clean your office as well. If your vacuum cleaner uses vacuum bags, well, 15% of the cost of vacuum bags is tax deductible. Every purchase that you use, including some mundane things like the filter for your furnace, the light bulbs in the ceiling, all of it is tax deductible. If you have 10 windows in your house and one of them is in your office and you buy a bottle of window cleaner, 10% of that bottle is now tax deductible because you use it to clean the window in your office. So you kind of get the idea that anything within the 4 walls of your office, and that's why I said at the beginning that if at all possible, find yourself an isolated spot in your house and that is just your office. So in my case, I have a room here. It's got 4 walls and this is my office. That's the only thing this room is used for. Anything, as soon as I walk in that door, everything within this room could be used as a tax deduction. The box of Kleenex on the desk, right down to the dog bed that's in the corner in case one of my dogs decides to join me for the day. So I wanted to start off with that just to show you the scope of what is available to you. There is so much. A lot of people don't actually realize when they start a home business, their own graphic studio or whatever you want to call it from your home, how much these deductions can add up. And although I don't do it myself, I personally don't keep receipts for my window cleaner. I'm not about to save every single Walmart receipt I receive and try to itemize. It's like, here's an item I'll use and circle this one and this one. I don't personally do that, but it is available. If I wanted to, I could. And so can you. And all these little tax deductions do add up and they do help you on your income tax return. And let me tell you, if you've got a good accountant that really knows what they're doing, they can drastically reduce the amount you have to pay at the end of the year using all these deductions. As far as your office, you also have office supplies. Everything within your office, including your sketchbooks, your pens, your pencils, paper, scissors, any art supplies. If you happen to be doing art as part of your design, maybe you're a fine artist and you use markers or pens, watercolors, all that stuff, ink for your printer, blank media such as CDs or even USB keys and all that stuff is all deductible. Your Pantone color guides, if you buy those, they're deductible. If you have to buy extra chargers for your phones and your tablets and all that stuff, again, they're all deductible. You need to keep receipts for everything. Now, as far as the equipment in your office, of course, your computer. And depending, some accountants do them differently. If you're doing a computer purchase, some of them would like to amortize it over certain years. Some of them like to do it as one big lump sum. Just talk to your accountant and figure out how they want to incorporate the more permanent equipment, stuff like your computer, external storage devices, hard drives and that, your tablets like your iPads, your drawing tablets and stylists like your Wacoms and that, your printers, maybe extra monitors. This also includes stuff like scanners and cameras and all the camera accessories. And don't forget your phone. Even if you're using your home phone as your business phone, you get to claim part of your phone bill. And in some cases, you can calculate that based on the hours you're working. If you work an 8-hour day, then that's 33% of your phone bill is now tax deductible. And your mobile phone, that you can argue that your mobile phone is 100% tax deductible. At least that's the way my accountant does it. Because all I had to tell him is if it wasn't for my business, I don't think I'd really need a mobile phone. And that was good enough for him to say, okay, well, it's 100% tax write-off for the business. Now, once you get past all the equipment that is kind of the pillars of your work, the stuff that doesn't really change too much, like you might update your computer every few years, but most of the time it's there ongoing, then you also dive down into stuff like your software. And there are tons and tons of software. And I'm not just talking about the subscription stuff like Creative Cloud and such, but there are tons of smaller software, stuff that you might pay $5 for, or $10 for. All these things add up. And yes, you can claim all those as deductions. Your font management, all the fonts. If you purchase fonts for clients, it doesn't matter if you charge your client for the font. As long as you buy it, you can claim it as an expense. As well as online tools. Like if you use Evernote or if you use Dropbox or if you subscribe to any stock photo sites, those payments are also all tax deductible. Now, some people, I just wanted to touch on this here. Some people I know I've talked to before who have set up their businesses don't realize that something that you are charging your clients for, if you are purchasing it, it's also a tax deduction for you. So if you are buying a stock photo, you can claim that purchase on your taxes, even though you are then charging your client for the purchase of the stock photo. It's two completely separate things. And I know from dealing with past designers that I'd helped set up businesses and that some of them didn't realize that their fonts and their photos, and in some cases videos, or even if they had to buy audio clips, they didn't realize that even though their clients were paying for it because they were passing the cost on to the client, they can still claim them as a tax deduction because they had to purchase them in order to complete the job. So that kind of rounds out some of the home office stuff. But now let's move into more of the personal growth and your actual business expenses. So as far as yourself as a graphic designer, any books, magazines, conferences, webinars, courses, classes, it doesn't matter if they're online or somewhere in person, anything you do that betters yourself as a graphic designer can be claimed as a tax deduction. This also means stuff like any affiliation, any club, any organizations you belong to. You can also go so far as to claim your cable bill and even your Netflix account. If you watch, because Netflix has tons of documentaries about all sorts of design-related things. And if you could say, yeah, I watched some of those, then you can claim part of, if not all of, your Netflix and your cable TV account. Because you can say you use it as inspiration. When it comes to books, they don't necessarily have to be graphic design books. You could pick up books for just inspirational purposes. If you want to buy a National Geographic's Best Photos of 2015 book, you've got a really good argument to say that that book is for inspiration because you're looking at how colors interact together or how composition is done, what photographers are up to. Even if you're not a photographer, there's still so much as a graphic designer you can get out of one of those books that there's no reason you shouldn't be able to claim it on your taxes. And don't forget, as you're doing this, if you're going to classes, if you're going to take courses or you're going to conferences, all your meals, your travel expenses and related expenses are all tax deductible. Your laundry. Did you know that if you go on a conference somewhere, if you're staying overnight, when you get back, you can claim your very first dry cleaning bill as a business expense to clean the clothes that you wore while you were away? And even though your normal day-to-day clothes is not a tax deduction, you can't claim it on your taxes. If you do have something, say your logo or your name embroidered on your clothes or screen printed, those clothes do then become part of your business expense because you've had the name put on them. And it's not just the cost of having the name put on them. You could then claim all the clothes. So I know some designers that do that. They have every piece of clothing they have a small embroidery of their logo put on it just so they can claim their clothes on their taxes. Now, I don't do this myself. I don't have anything with my logo on it. But I do know a few designers that do, specifically for that reason. Now, moving on from personal growth more into branding and self-promotion. Anything you do to promote your business is obviously a tax deduction. Now, this one should be a no-brainer. If you make business cards or any other marketing material, if you place ads, if you pay to sponsor somebody, whatever the case, they're all tax deductible. If you give a thank you gift to a client or anybody, it's tax deduction. Even if that gift is to a family member or a friend. I mean, if your grandmother comes over to spend the day and she decides to help you stuffing envelopes that you're sending out to your clients, and you decide to buy your grandma a box of chocolate afterwards in order to thank her for her help, well, that box of chocolates is tax deductible because she helped you with your business. You could even go so far as to claiming meals. If you go out for dinner with a friend, if that friend also happens to be a client and you do end up discussing business over dinner, then you can claim the receipt from that dinner as a business expense. Now, other branding and self-promotion stuff, your website hosting and your domain registration, doesn't matter how many domain names you have, if they're all business related, you can claim them all on your taxes. Plus all the other stuff, like all the paid plugins, themes, add-ons, Photoshop actions, any special add-ons for any software you have are all tax deductions. Award submissions. If you submit something you've done to an award and there's a fee involved with submitting that item, you can claim that fee as a tax deduction. Now, I personally have never done this. I refuse to pay money to have one of my designs entered into a contest. I don't believe in that, but there's a lot of designers that do it. And if you do pay that fee, you can claim it on your taxes. Now, another interesting thing is if you do have clients coming to your house, whether you do it for like a one-time open house, or if you do have clients coming on a regular basis, any food or drink that you do serve them is tax deductible. So now moving away from brand and self-promotion and getting into the actual production of your work, there are a lot of tax deductions that you can claim from actually working on things. Such as if you need print proofs or if you have to do photocopies, or I don't remember the last time I did it, but if you have to pay to fax something somewhere, all expenses associated with those are tax deductible, as well as envelopes and stamps. If you are dealing with a printer somewhere and you have to pay a courier fee in order to get the proof to you or to your client, that's all tax deductible. As I mentioned earlier, any stock images, whether it's photos or vectors or sometimes videos or even audio files, anything you purchase, whether it's for yourself, whether it's for a client job or what, they are tax deductible. Anybody you hire, whether you're hiring a virtual assistant, if you're hiring a contractor to do a certain job, maybe you're a web designer and you have a developer that you pay to help you on that side of things. Maybe you hire a freelancer to do something. I know last week's episode was about not calling yourself a freelancer, but there's nothing wrong with hiring somebody who calls himself a freelancer if that's what they want to call themselves. But if you need, say, an illustration and you're not an illustrator and you hire somebody to draw an illustration, well, that payment to that person is a tax deduction. And if you're not, like I work by myself here, but if you hire somebody to work with you, of course, the employee is a tax deductible. and a lot of the expenses associated with it. Now here's something I found interesting as I was doing research for this episode. I came across a couple of places that mentioned hiring a family member and putting them on the payroll, even if they only help you out a very little bit. And it could be your spouse, it could be one of your kids, or whatever the case may be. But it opens up all sorts of tax benefits for you, including, and I found this one really interesting, medical expenses. So say you hire your spouse because they maybe help you proofread jobs from time to time, or maybe they file your paperwork for you afterwards. Well, if you hire your spouse and you offer them full medical benefits, including their family, which covers you as well, then it doesn't stop you from having to pay for them, but any medical expense that you pay now becomes a business write-off because you've agreed to pay your employee, aka your spouse, full medical coverage. So as I said, you'd still have to pay the medical bill, but now you get to claim that as an expense on your taxes. So I thought that one was really interesting when I discovered it. Now, I'm covered under my wife's benefits, so it doesn't help me at all, but I thought it was very interesting. Now, when you are running your own business, there's a lot of times that you have to go out and visit other clients, and you're going to have some sort of travel expense there. So you have your vehicle, and anytime you travel between your home office and going to visit a client, that time traveling or that distance, that mileage is, so you should be keeping track of your mileage. If you lease the vehicle or purchase a vehicle, of course, your vehicle itself, at least a portion of it is tax deductible for your business. Now, I know myself, I've never leased a vehicle. And in my case, because I work from home and I have a truck, my trucks, there's like sometimes 3, 4, 5 days in a row where my truck will not leave the driveway just because while I'm working, I don't have a reason to be going out. So it just sits there. And if I do happen to go out in the evening, I use my wife's car because it's much less expensive on gas. And the only reason I have a truck is because we have a camper, a big trailer, and I need the truck to pull it. So that's why I have a big truck that's really hard on gas. But I've never leased a vehicle. I've always purchased a much older vehicle for like anywhere between $5,000 and $8,000. And I'll pay that and keep it for a few years. And my accountant, he says, we're able to deduct the expenses from those purchases, as well as repairs and upkeep. So tires and windshield wiper blades and windshield washer and all that stuff, as well as fuel, any parking expenses. If I have to pay, whether it's at a parking lot or even parking meters, you keep track of that sort of stuff, and you can claim all of that on your taxes. Now, an interesting thing is, say you're a graphic designer and you don't necessarily work from home. You rent a spot somewhere, maybe in one of those shared co-op office buildings or something like that. And that's where you go work just because for whatever reason, maybe there's too many distractions at home. So you do that. Well, technically, you're not allowed to claim your travel time going from home to work. But if you can also say, I also have a home office, even if it's a little corner of the bedroom that you say that corner of the bedroom is my office, now you are traveling from office to office, in which case you can claim that travel expense. So there's a little trick there. If you do that, if you own a cottage somewhere and whenever you go to the cottage, you bring your laptop and you do some work there, you can claim that part of the cottage is your office. And now anytime you travel to the cottage, you can claim that travel as a business expense because you're traveling between offices. So that's another one that not too many people know about that one. Now, I mentioned household supplies, whether it's cleaning supplies for windows, vacuum bags, even your toilet paper and Kleenex. I mean, unless you're able to hold yourself and you can prove that you never go to the washroom during work hours, you should be able to claim everything from the toilet paper that you use to the hand soap you use to wash your hands afterwards. And if you do go out to travel to go see clients and say you're out for the better part of the day and you stop to have a meal for lunch on your own, even if it's just running through a drive-through somewhere, that meal can be tax deductible because you're doing it as part of your business and traveling to clients. And you're allowed to claim a meal like that from time to time. Now, the last little thing I want to talk to you about here kind of falls under the other category. And these are things that you can claim as a graphic designer that really don't have a lot to do with your business, or maybe some have to do with your business, but not with the actual running or designing or anything like that. And that's stuff like tax preparation. I mean, don't forget that if you're hiring an accountant to do your taxes, that is a write-off. Whatever your accountant is charging you, you can write that off on your taxes. Same thing with your lawyer. If you create a new contract or have something updated on your contract and you get your lawyer to verify it and they send you a bill for it, well, you can claim that. your health insurance, anything you're paying for your health insurance or your home insurance. I have a special insurance. When I started my business, I've got a home insurance, but I also have a special business insurance that I'm paying for. And again, that is tax deductible. And that's a special policy I have attached on to my home insurance that specifically covers all the equipment in my office. So if anything happens, then there's no questioning that, yes, I had all this equipment in my office because I have it all documented. Now, as well as that, there's bank fees. If you're running your own home-based business, you should really have a special business account that's just for it. And whatever bank fees are involved with that, again, tax deductible. Your credit card, if you're using a credit card to do purchases, now the credit card itself, if there's a yearly fee to it, if it is a business credit card, like I have a Visa card that I only use for my business, well, the yearly fee on it is tax deductible, as well as any interest. Should a month go by and I don't pay off the full balance, any interest that it's occurred on my credit card is tax deductible. And finally, any donations you do, if you donate something to charity and you get a receipt for it, that receipt is tax deductible. Now, I want to give you a little hint here. Whenever you do pro bono work, if you do any work for a registered charity, anytime somebody contacts me and if I agree to do work for them, I always tell them that this is how I'm going to do it. And let me explain, because this means it becomes a tax deduction for you. You might not be being paid for the work, but you can claim it on your taxes. And what I do is I tell them I will accumulate my time. Then what I will do is I will invoice them for the work I did. They must pay me for the work. Then I turn around and I donate that exact same amount back to the charity. So that allows me two things. First of all, it allows me to keep a record of the work I actually did for them, and I get a donation for whatever amount of time I spent into it. So that pretty well covers what I wanted to talk about. The main point that I wanted to get across today is that there are so many things that you can claim on your taxes that you might not be thinking about. And the best thing to do is sit down with a professional, with an accountant, with a tax preparation specialist, or whatever they want to call themselves, and talk to them and find out what you can do, because every little deduction that you add to your taxes means more money in your pocket afterwards. And especially if you combine your taxes with that of your spouse's and then let your accountant work their magic, you can come out pretty squeaky clean after that and either have a very small, if sometimes no, taxes due at the end of the year. So once again, I did create a checklist of all these various items that you can check off to make sure that you are keeping track of all of them either for next year or as you're gathering your paperwork to give to your accountant this year, just to check off and say, yes, I covered all these bases. And you can get that by either clicking on the link in the show notes or by visiting resourcefuldesigner.com/tax-claims. Now, I would love to know if there's something I forgot. Is there a big tax deduction that you do every year that I might not have mentioned? Or do you have some fancy loophole or something that you use in your area? Or maybe there's a tax law that I don't know about. Again, I'm in Canada. I know Canadian laws and what I can do, and I know a little bit in the States from talking to a lot of people. But maybe you're somewhere in the world where they have a completely different tax law and there's something interesting that you'd like to share. Well, if so, head on over to resourcefuldesigner.com, episode 18, and leave a comment on the show notes page talking about what you do and how you get fancy with your taxes. Now, if you want to contact me, you can fill out my feedback form at resourcefuldesigner.com/feedback or send me an email at feedback@resourcefuldesigner.com. I would love for you to follow me on Twitter at resourcefulD and check out my Facebook page at facebook.com/resourcefuldesigner. Now, in next week's episode, I'm going to discuss something I read in a blog post by a listener of the show, Felipe Manduano, on how finding new design clients may not be your biggest problem. So until then, keep up the great work in your design business. Make sure you put a few hours aside to get your taxes ready to get to your accountant as tax season is quickly approaching, and then put it out of mind as you get back to designing. I look forward to coming back to you again next week with a brand new episode. But until then, I'm Mark DeCote, reminding you to stay creative.
Thanks for listening to the Resourceful Designer podcast at resourcefuldesigner.com.